Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear colonialism, what comes to mind? Probably images of, grand battles, flags being planted, and overt domination, right?
Yeah, that's the standard picture for sure.
But what if we told you the fight against colonial rule was far more diverse, like way more complex than just military clashes?
Hmm.
And what if those struggles from centuries ago still shape our world today, influencing everything from, say, global economics to the very way we think about knowledge itself?
It's a huge connection, absolutely.
Today, we're diving deep into the multifaceted world of African resistance to colonialism and the powerful ideas that emerged from anti-colonial thought. We've got a fascinating stack of sources, everything from historical accounts of fierce battles, academic papers on global social theory, and even a lively Reddit discussion about anti-colonialism today.
Quite a mix.
Right. Our mission is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, helping you understand not just how people resisted, but how those acts and ideas continue to resonate and, well, challenge us in the 21st century. Prepare to discover how everyday, kind of invisible acts of defiance, far removed from grand battlefields, played a crucial role, and how the very way we think about knowledge was, and still is, a battleground shaped by colonial power.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these sources reveal that resistance wasn't just one thing, not monolithic at all.
A spectrum, you mean?
Exactly, a broad spectrum, ranging from subtle, almost unseen, everyday acts of defiance, think workers slowing down,
Well,
all the way to monumental military campaigns.
okay.
And beyond the physical struggle, an equally profound battle was waged in the realm of ideas, challenging the very foundations of colonial power and the knowledge systems it tried to impose. We'll explore how these intellectual challenges became central to understanding why colonialism, even after its formal end, continues to shape global dynamics.
Okay, let's start by grounding ourselves in the historical reality. Our source on African resistance to colonialism makes it very clear. Colonialism brought immense, often devastating change to African societies. So naturally, people resisted.
Right, it's a natural reaction to oppression.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It wasn't always the dramatic guerrilla warfare or the large-scale uprisings we often imagine.
That's right. The evidence points to a few key insights about resistance. First, most people weren't fighting against some abstract idea of colonialism.
Okay.
They were reacting to specific, oppressive policies like sudden land seizures, or maybe new taxes they couldn't pay, or being forced into labor for building roads and railways, very concrete things.
Right, things hitting them directly.
Exactly. Second, people generally went about their lives until these specific policies disrupted them, resisted as much as they could,
Yeah.
and then, well, tried to return to their routines. It highlights a very pragmatic, localized response.
So not constant rebellion everywhere all the time?
Not necessarily, no. And third, a significant portion of resistance was what we might call invisible today. It wasn't recorded in official documents, you see.
Invisible, like what?
Think of workers deliberately slowing down productivity, or people giving colonial officials purposely wrong directions to get them lost, or maybe clerks subtly sabotaging administrative forms. Little things.
Nah, okay, I can picture that. Getting officials lost.
These subtle acts, while they don't sound dramatic, were likely widespread and constant, a kind of everyday friction.
So it's not just about the iconic battles, but these constant, quiet acts of defiance that reveal a much broader, more human picture of resistance. That's an eye-opening perspective.
It paints a fuller picture.
But that doesn't mean military resistance didn't happen. Far from it. When conditions became particularly difficult or, charismatic leaders emerged, societies absolutely used military campaigns. We have some incredible examples, starting with a truly iconic victory, the Battle of Adwa.
Ah, yes, Adwa, 1896. It's a powerful case study of what unified resistance could achieve. By 1895, Italy saw an opportunity, they thought, to conquer Ethiopia.
Why Ethiopia?
Well, they hoped to boost their national reputation, resettle poor Italians. What they ignored, or didn't grasp, was that Ethiopia was already a vast multicultural state led by Emperor Menelik II.
Okay.
The Italians initially tried to use a deceptive treaty. It actually said different things in the Italian version versus the Amharic version.
Seriously, why?
Yeah, and they even tried to divide Ethiopians by appealing to ethnic minorities. When that failed, they just sent an army.
And Menelik II, with the crucial help of Empress Taytu, responded.
How?
with force.
With incredible force. Taytu was deeply suspicious of the Italians,
Wow.
and she reportedly declared something like, "We will slaughter those who come to invade us. There is no Ethiopian who will not plant his feet in the sand and face death to save his country."
That's an incredibly defiant statement. Really highlights the spirit of unity and determination there.
Indeed. Together, Menelik and Taytu mobilized the entire nation, an army of maybe 100,000 men from all ethnic and religious groups.
Wow, 100,000.
And Ethiopian peasants helped out too, harassing the Italian army as they approached. Then, on March 1st, 1896, the Ethiopians decisively defeated the Italians at Adwa. It was a stunning victory that ensured Ethiopia remained independent amidst the European scramble for Africa. Just remarkable unity and strategic adaptation.
A truly remarkable display of strategic brilliance. But, as you said, that wasn't the only form of organized military resistance. Over in West Africa, we find the story of Samori Toure.
Right, Samori Toure, a Muslim leader who, interestingly, didn't inherit a kingdom but built his own, the Wasulu Empire. Another compelling example of resilience.
Built his own, okay.
He was a seasoned soldier building a military state with maybe 30,000 to 40,000 men by the 1880s. When the French advanced into his territory in 1881, Samori tried to negotiate. He even tried playing the British and French against each other. And he was always updating his weapons, though he lacked artillery, which was a big disadvantage sometimes.
So, despite his strategic thinking and efforts to modernize, he faced defeats. But you said he didn't give up easily.
Not at all. After an initial treaty was, well, consistently broken by the French, Samori was forced to fight again. In 1892, after a really closely fought battle, he was defeated.
Okay.
But his response was extraordinary. He uprooted his entire empire, burned everything man-made behind him, and moved his whole population eastward.
Moved the whole empire. That's drastic.
Absolutely. He fought the French for almost 18 years before finally being captured in 1898. He just demonstrates incredible resilience and, well, a willingness to make immense sacrifices to resist colonial conquest.
18 years. Incredible. And one more example from East Africa that shows maybe both the early challenges and how strategies evolved. Tanganyika.
Yes, Tanganyika.
Yeah.
Initial resistance to the German invasion in the 1890s was quite fragmented. You had coastal city-states fighting, interior communities fighting, but separately.
Not unified like Ethiopia initially?
Exactly. A Muslim leader named Abu Shiri, for example, defended his city with 8,000 men in 1888. But these fragmented efforts just weren't enough against well-armed German forces. By 1905, Germany largely controlled Tanganyika. They seized land, forced indigenous people into poorly paid labor, sometimes requiring 28 days a year of unpaid work on cotton plantations, plus taxes. This led to huge resentment.
Unpaid work plus taxes.
Yeah, I can see how that would build resentment, which eventually sparked a massive uprising unified by a prophet, right?
Precisely. Kinjekit Lee in Weil. He used religion to unite people from maybe as many as 20 different ethnic groups.
20 groups, that's significant unity.
It was. He claimed God told him that if they fought for freedom, their ancestors would help. Some leaders even promised immunity from German bullets. Magical protection.
Did that work?
Unfortunately, no. German bullets proved deadly in mass battles, leading to heavy defeats initially. However, the terrible conditions meant resistance continued, but it shifted. It became more about effective ambushes, guerrilla warfare.
Learning and adapting. Yes. It took the Germans 2 years to finally put down the rebellion, at a horrific cost, perhaps 100,000 lives lost. So these examples, from unified victories like Adwa to prolonged resistance like Samori's and these religiously inspired uprisings like Maji Maji, they really illustrate the diverse and tenacious spirit of early resistance, even when facing overwhelming odds.
It really does. Now, beyond the battlefields, you mentioned there was also this profound intellectual struggle. Our sources highlight the rise of what's now called anti-colonial social theory. That sounds like a very academic term. How does it shift our everyday understanding of colonialism beyond just the historical facts?
That's a great question, because this is where we connect the dots to a much broader understanding of how power actually operates. Anti-colonial social theory acts as the kind of umbrella term. It covers a range of perspectives, including indigeneity.
Indigeneity, exactly.
That's perspectives rooted in the unique histories, the knowledge systems, and the experiences of native or aboriginal peoples. So indigeneity, Orientalism, Eurocentrism, post-colonial, decolonial studies, Southern sociology, lots of threads.
Okay, quite a few terms there.
Yeah, but they all explore this critical relationship between colonialism and how knowledge itself is produced. The fundamental argument is that knowledge isn't neutral. It's deeply shaped by power dynamics.
So it's not just about who controls the land, but who controls the narrative, who gets to define what is known and true in the world.
Exactly that. And what's fascinating, something many people might use interchangeably today, is the historical distinction between colonialism and imperialism.
Ah, right. I often just lump them together. What was the difference?
Historically, there was a clearer distinction, yeah. Colonialism usually involved a metropole state like a dominant mother country, directly controlling territories. Military intervention using violence, law, policies to dominate peoples and lands beyond its borders. Direct control.
Okay, boots on the ground.
Right. Imperialism, on the other hand, could mean domination without direct territorial control. Instead, relying on exploitative economic and political influences, almost like an invisible hand pulling the strings.
More indirect influence.
Yes. Now, after the formal end of colonialism, these terms often get used more interchangeably, and contemporary forms of domination are sometimes called neo-colonialism.
Okay, that makes sense. So who were some of the early thinkers who started challenging these colonial narratives, maybe even before many countries gained independence?
Well, back in the late 19th century, we see what some call organic intellectuals emerging in colonized regions, people thinking critically from within the situation. Jose Rizal from the Philippines is a great example.
Rizal, okay.
He powerfully critiqued the Spanish colonial knowledge that blamed the indolence, the supposed laziness of the Filipino peasantry for their backwardness.
Ah, blaming the victim.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
Rizal argued very persuasively that it was actually Spain's exploitation and extraction of resources that made the Philippines backward. It wasn't inherent laziness at all. Similarly, over in India, you had Dada Panararoji. He presented his drain theory.
Drain theory.
Yeah, he meticulously detailed how British political control led to this massive transfer of wealth out of India to Britain, how it deindustrialized India's textile industry to kill competition, and how Indians were forced to pay taxes for the very governance that was exploiting them.
Paying for their own exploitation. Wow.
Yeah.
These were really powerful early critiques laying the groundwork. And then we see a broader challenge to what we now call Eurocentrism, which sounds like a critique of Europe's central role in how we understand history.
It is, yeah. A critical component of anti-colonial thought is definitely the critique of Eurocentrism. The Marxist political economist Samir Amin, in his book Eurocentrism, argued it was basically the dominant cultural and intellectual face of Western capitalism.
Oh, so?
He challenged the common claim that Europe's history was unique because of this straight line of progressive ideas from Greek and Roman civilizations feeding into the Enlightenment.
The standard Western Civ narrative.
Exactly. And this was echoed by Martin Bernal's work, Black Athena. Bernal contended that Greek knowledge systems weren't actually unique, but borrowed heavily from Egyptians and Phoenicians.
So not invented in isolation.
Not at all. These works fundamentally debunk the idea of Europe as the sole original source of progressive thought. Instead, they presented European thought as more of a synthesis, drawing on global influences.
That's a powerful challenge to the traditional narrative. If Europe wasn't the sole source of progressive thought, where else were significant intellectual movements taking shape? That leads us to Southern theory, right? What's that about?
Exactly. Raewyn Connell's Southern theory was a real watershed moment. While earlier discussions looked at colonialism's impact on European social sciences, Connell's work focused on the sociological scholarship emerging from places like Nigeria, Iran, India, Latin America.
Okay, from the global South itself.
Precisely. She argued that these perspectives should hold equal epistemic valence.
Epistemic valence, meaning?
Meaning their intellectual frameworks, their insights, deserve the same weight and attention, the same academic standing as those from Europe and North America.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be treated as secondary or just, derivative.
Got it. Equal footing.
Right. For Connell, the South became a metaphor, not just a geographical territory, but for a knowledge periphery, a consciousness of social sectors, like the subalterns, those marginalized groups who often lack a voice in dominant narratives.
The people usually left out of the story.
Yes. This perspective basically says power is central to how knowledge gets formed, and anti-colonial theory offers new ways to do social science. It focuses on how we theorize, not just what we theorize about.
Okay, so that brings us to the period after independence. The colonial flags come down, countries are formally free. Did the anti-colonial struggle just end? Our sources strongly suggest no. And this concept of coloniality of power seems key here.
That's absolutely right. As one of our sources, Yudani Yamahata's essay points out, the success of national liberation didn't necessarily mean the end of anti-colonial movements. Why? because, quote, the colonial structure of power remains deeply embedded in contemporary society.
Embedded how?
Well, think about the nation-state itself and nationalism. These can be seen largely as European inventions, often implemented kind of arbitrarily by colonial powers, which ironically ended up creating new divisions.
So the tools used to fight colonialism were sometimes colonial tools.
In a way, yes. Yamahata argues that while nationalism was a crucial means and necessary tool for independence, it wasn't the ultimate end of true decolonization.
So nationalism, which was obviously so critical for mobilizing diverse communities against a common enemy, it also has its own complexities. It can carry forward some colonial structures.
Absolutely. For instance, the independence movement in India often propagated Hindu culture, despite India's incredibly multicultural reality. And even Gandhi's nonviolence drew from Western thinkers, even as he envisioned a Hindu Ram Raja.
Interesting tension there.
But Yamahata also emphasizes the agency of the colonized. She highlights hybridity, how anti-colonial nationalists filtered European ideas, adapted them to create a modern national culture that was still distinct, like India's local intelligentsia pushing for mother tongues over English.
So it was adaptation, a mix, not just copying.
Right, a complex adaptation, not a pure derivative.
That's a powerful idea, that the fight continues even after the flags change. What is this coloniality of power in more everyday terms? How does it actually show up today?
Okay, so Anibal Quijano's concept of coloniality of power argues it's this structure of control that continues to dominate the world system. It's the enduring legacy of how imperialism, slavery, and capitalism gave rise to a European or Western global dominance that became sort of baked into what we understand as modern society itself.
Baked in.
It encompasses hierarchical forms of power, knowledge, how we see ourselves and others, subjectivity, human relations like racism and patriarchy, and even our relationship with nature, our dominion over it. So the idea is old-fashioned colonialism has ended, but coloniality has not.
Coloniality hasn't ended. Okay.
And so anti-colonial movements today often aim for liberation from all these forms of power that are organized as inequality, discrimination, and exploitation. Think about how global fashion trends are still often dictated from just a few cultural centers in the West, or how certain international economic structures keep poorer nations reliant on richer ones for manufactured goods or loans. That's coloniality still at work, subtly shaping our world.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds very much like what people call neocolonialism, where countries are formally independent, but still dependent in other more subtle ways. But is there maybe a fine line between identifying this coloniality of power and perhaps attributing all modern challenges solely to colonial legacies, even when new factors might be at play?
That's a really crucial point for a nuanced understanding. You're right. The new global order is described as both post-colonial and neo-colonial, meaning it carries that historical baggage, absolutely,
Yeah.
but it also develops new dynamics. Our sources delve into two key areas where this coloniality of power seems particularly persistent: the economy and gender.
Okay, economy and gender.
Yeah. Lenin, for instance, writing way back, explained in Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, that capitalism's growth in Europe required subordinating non-industrialized countries for resources and markets. It wasn't accidental.
A necessary feature of the system, he argued.
Right. And then Frantz Fanon critically observed that after independence, the national middle class, the new local elite, often just became business agents of the Western bourgeoisie. They essentially transformed post-colonial states into rentier states.
Rentier states, like living off rent.
Kind of. Countries that get a big chunk of their national income from external rents, like exporting oil or minerals or foreign aid, rather than from diverse, productive internal activity. This just perpetuates unequal economic relations, even if it looks different on the surface. And it's a deeply transnational issue.
And it's not just economic. You mentioned gender, too. The sources highlight the intersectional nature of coloniality.
Indeed. Kimberly Crenshaw's concept of intersectionality is really helpful here. It helps us understand that women in anti-colonial movements often faced a two-pronged struggle.
Two-pronged.
They are fighting against the colonial powers, yes, but also often against internal patriarchal structures within their own societies or movements.
Right. Fighting on two fronts.
Exactly. And nationalist histories often overlook women's agency, right? They might focus on women's public participation, like marches,
Right.
but neglect how women politicize the home or their specific contributions. As one source puts it, they had to fight two colonialisms, and they were often marginalized. even after contributing significantly to the national liberation struggle.
Still facing sexism within the movement and after.
Precisely. This reveals that hierarchical power relations around gender are deeply embedded legacies of colonialism, and overcoming them requires an intersectional approach to decolonization. You can't just tackle one without the other.
Speaking of those deeply embedded legacies, one figure really stands out in understanding the psychological and societal impacts of colonialism, Frantz Fanon. He seems like a truly pivotal voice in anti-colonial thought, especially on how it affected the individual mind.
Absolutely. Fanon,
Yeah.
a formidable intellectual and activist. He's considered one of the major anti-colonial voices of Africa, no question. His work, particularly The Wretched of the Earth, offers this remarkably prescient analysis of what happens after anti-colonial struggles succeed.
Prescient. Like he saw what was coming.
Very much so. He warned about what he called the pitfalls of national consciousness. He worried that national liberation, rather than being for all the people, could just become a crude and fragile travesty.
A travesty how?
He foresaw this rapacious neocolonial comprador class stepping into power. Basically, a local elite acting primarily on behalf of foreign economic interests.
The business agents you mentioned earlier?
Exactly them. Continuing the exploitation of the masses just under a new flag by forming neocolonial pacts with former colonizers, and often exploiting ethnic and religious factors for their own gain to divide and rule internally.
So even with independence, the structures of exploitation could just persist, maybe even worsen, just with different faces at the top. Fanon also explored the deep psychological impact of colonialism, right? How it distorted a person's sense of self.
Oh, absolutely. His earlier work, Black Skin, White Masks, is a classic on the phenomenology of race.
Phenomenology, can you break that down?
Sure, it's basically a philosophical way of looking at how we experience things directly. So Fanon explored how racial identity is experienced and shaped by the colonial context. He delves into the internal feelings, the shock of an African person interacting with Europeans, being abruptly confronted with racial prejudice.
That sudden awareness of being seen differently.
Yes, and the objectifying term Negro that reduced individuals to what he called a phobogenic object, essentially, an object of irrational fear or revulsion, stripping them of their humanity.
Wow, phobogenic object. Powerful term.
It is. Fanon also explored how scientific racism, pseudoscience, really portrayed Africans as evolutionary retardates, reducing people to biology, and how this perpetuated a false consciousness that made some colonized people strive to become, say, civilized black Frenchmen, internalizing the colonizers' values.
Trying to be something they weren't, defined by the colonizer.
Right. Ultimately, Fanon advocated for universal humanity. He urged people to reject being defined solely by a past of enslavement or by these colonial-imposed identities, to forge something new.
It's clear Fanon's insights are incredibly relevant today, and we definitely see anti-colonial ideas influencing contemporary movements, especially, it seems, on the left. The Reddit discussion we looked at shows this vividly, right? It highlights how these historical and theoretical frameworks are being applied in current conversations.
Yeah, that Reddit thread, why are anti-colonialist and indigenous movements major influences on the left today? It reveals a really fascinating contemporary debate.
Yeah.
A lot of commenters argue that anti-colonial movements are inherently tied to the left because, well, colonialism is fundamentally seen as a system of domination designed to create and maintain capitalist relations that favor the colonizer.
Okay, linking colonialism and capitalism directly.
Right. And indigenous groups, having opposed colonialism for centuries, often naturally align with this perspective, lending powerful lived experience and, vocabulary to the broader movement.
But it's not without its complexities and internal critiques within these movements, is it? It seems like there are real debates about how these ideas get applied.
Absolutely. The discussion highlights some important nuances. Some commenters raise questions about ideological purity, for example. Like, is it contradictory for certain leftist ideologies to support anti-colonial movements that might have ethno-nationalist or perhaps non-leftist long-term goals?
Yeah, potential conflicts there.
Others debate the very definition of indigenous. Is it purely a historical claim to land, or is it more about a social relation of being colonized? How does that apply globally?
Tricky definitions.
And the Israel-Palestine conflict is frequently cited by some commenters as a contemporary example where these frameworks, indigenous colonizers, are applied, leading to very different perspectives depending on who you ask.
A very contested application, for sure.
And there's also some concern voiced in the thread about the phrase decolonize your mind, becoming maybe a bit of a surface-level catchphrase, used without really deep engagement with what that entails.
It becomes trendy without the substance.
Potentially, yeah. That's the concern.
So these aren't simple black and white issues. They're dynamic and constantly evolving conversations full of debate.
Precisely. The conversation underscores that anti-colonialism, as a topic for left, isn't actually new. You can trace it back to thinkers like Marx. However, its contemporary expression grapples with how to dismantle these deeply ingrained systems of power like racism, classism, patriarchy that, as we've discussed, persist even after formal independence.
The coloniality is still at work.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It recognizes that these issues are deeply transnational and intersectional. You can't untangle them easily. And it also forces a critical look at what one source called the collective scientific unconsciousness.
Collective scientific unconsciousness.
Yeah, the unexamined assumptions embedded in how we've come to understand the world, often through a Western lens. It challenges us to really interrogate the very foundations of knowledge production itself. Who gets to define what's valid knowledge?
Right. This has been a truly expansive deep dive. We've moved from those incredible, often invisible acts of resistance in colonial Africa through the intellectual battles that challenged Eurocentric thought, all the way to these ongoing complex discussions shaping anti-colonial movements today. We've seen how figures like Empress Taytu, Samori Toure, and Kinjekitile represent that fierce historical resistance, and how thinkers like José Rizal, Dadapai Naroji, Samir Amin, Raywin Connell, and of course Frantz Fanon built the theoretical framework for understanding coloniality's enduring grip.
And if we connect all this to the bigger picture, it becomes pretty clear that the struggle against colonialism wasn't just some historical chapter that closed. It's a continuous political and, importantly, epistemic project, a project about knowledge.
Epistemic, right, about how we know what we know.
Exactly. It's about recognizing how power shapes basically ideas we hold about history and progress. Anti-colonial thought really urges us to question the assumptions embedded in our knowledge systems, maybe challenge them, and try to understand the world through multiple, often marginalized perspectives.
Hearing those other voices.
Yes. It reminds us that achieving liberation extends beyond just political independence to a much deeper, true intellectual and social decolonization.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? Hopefully you've now been equipped with a richer, more nuanced understanding of anti-colonialism, not as some relic of the past, but as a dynamic force still shaping our interconnected global world. It prompts us, I think, to look critically at the systems around us and question how colonial legacies might still be influencing our present, perhaps in the news you read, the products you buy, or even the way you think about global power dynamics.
And maybe this raises an important question to leave you with. Given the diverse forms of resistance we've seen, and this evolving understanding of coloniality, which, as we've explored, extends deep into economic structures, gender relations, even knowledge production, what might a truly decolonized future actually look like for our global society?
That's a big question.
It is. And maybe what responsibilities do we all have collectively and individually in dismantling these ingrained systems, even in places that might not have experienced formal, direct colonialism themselves? It's definitely a question that invites continuous exploration and critical thinking about the world we all inhabit.